So I was no longer a med student. I was no longer a runner. I was no longer this beautiful wife who goes on lots of dates with her new husband or goes out and gets drinks with her friends. There were lots of parts of me that I just felt like I lost.
Let me tell you what. There is absolutely nothing more exhausting than fearing for your life.
And obviously, like, a reminder of that is every time I look in the mirror. I ended up passing out and throwing up in the patient's room, and it was really embarrassing and just like very random. I knew I had cancer. To be completely honest with you, after reading them, I should have just gone to the ER. But I kind of try to just navigate it on my own by getting labs again, and then eventually seeing a heme-oncologist, getting a bone marrow biopsy, and confirming that, yes, this is leukemia. Living with AML is a full-time job. It consists of going to get labs done multiple times a week, going to the clinic multiple times a week, sometimes being admitted in the hospital for a week or for a month, going in to get procedures done like bone marrow biopsies, things like that. So really every week I have something on my schedule, and then when I'm not somewhere doing something scheduled, I'm at home and I'm resting and I'm making sure I'm eating enough and I'm making sure I'm drinking enough and I'm making sure I'm taking my meds on time and getting them from the pharmacy. And yes, cancer is hard, but it seriously is a full-time job. Like, there is no rest from it.
Oh, great. Yeah. All right.
So the first time when I said, this is weird, it's time to get it checked out, was my first day of my second year of medical school. I was on a clinical rotation, and we were just in a patient's room, like nothing was going on. There were no procedures, no blood, no vomiting, nothing gross. And I ended up passing out and throwing up in the patient's room, and it was really embarrassing and just like very random. And so then I called my doctor to get my labs done, and then as I was thinking about it, well, my legs do bleed a little longer than usual. Like, maybe it's not just a crappy razor, or, I was a college athlete and working out just got a lot harder. But those were just things that I was kind of pushing to the side. But the passing out was the final straw. And then, so when I got my labs back, I opened my labs and I knew I had cancer. So my story is a lot different from other people's in that sense, because my family is in healthcare. So, for example, my dad, he's the president of the hospital up in my hometown where I got my biopsy, and my stepmom also works there. So they like personally know the doctor. And I'm on the 10th floor of this story, and it's like a limited access building, and I got a knock on my door, which was very weird because usually people just say, hey, I'm here, come down, get me, whatever. And I got a knock on the door, and it was my dad and my stepmom. And I just knew right away. So they walked in my apartment, and then my dad was trying to talk, but he was crying. And then my stepmom looked at me and she was like, it's leukemia. And then I was like, okay. And then I just like couldn't really believe it. Part of me knew all along. So I was almost prepared for it, but I was just like, I wasn't sad, I was mad. I was like, because I was waiting all this time to figure out what was finally happening. And then just to be like, it confirmed cancer. Like, I was like, what the, like, it just sucked. I just knew my world was going to turn upside down. I knew everything was going to change at that point.
Hi everyone, this is my family. This is my husband Brandon, who's pretty awesome.
I think when I was diagnosed, I felt more hurt for my family and my friends because I can only imagine being told that type of diagnosis and getting that phone call or having that conversation. And because I did make all those phone calls and they were very, very, very hard. And so I think my way of coping for the longest time was trying to make sure everyone else was okay and trying to show that how strong I was and how optimistic I was and how brave I was and that I was going to get through this. And I truly believe this, and I still do believe that I will overcome this. But I needed them to know it so that they were okay. With my initial bone marrow biopsy that I was diagnosed with, they sent that out and tested it for different mutations. And I don't know exactly how they get to the conclusion of what mutations you do or don't have, but I was told that I had a RUNX1 mutation for AML, which is a high risk for relapse mutation. So basically there's high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. And for moderate to high risk, they are either talking about transplant or definitely doing a transplant. For my situation, they're like, we need a transplant, or like, this is coming back for sure. It came back anyway. But as far as what I was worried about was the fact that I have a first cousin who had ALL when she was little, and I had a second cousin who had APL, another type of leukemia, when he was in his 30s. And so I was like, okay, is this a thing that's like running in our family? And so I was worried for my sister and for my future kids. So they took a skin biopsy to test if this mutation was a spontaneous mutation that just happened in my leukemia cells, or if it was an inherited mutation that is in every single cell of my body, if my DNA. Unfortunately, it was a spontaneous mutation, so I won't be passing it down, and my sister won't get it. Well, hopefully doesn't get it. I basically just got really unlucky and got cancer. So I was diagnosed the end of August 23, and that's when I started my induction chemo to try to get me in remission and had my first month-long hospital stay. That put me in remission, so I was in remission, and then we were waiting for my first stem cell transplant, so it takes a while to coordinate to find a donor. So because we were waiting, I had 2 rounds of consolidation chemo, each 1 week long, like in the fall of 23. I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks during that time and did really well. And I was also still in remission, so no leukemia at this point. And then 6 months, for my 6 months post-transplant in July of 24, I got a bone marrow biopsy. And it showed that I had relapsed on a molecular level. So it wasn't like when they looked at my bone marrow itself, there was no leukemia cells, but then they do further testing, like 1 in every 10,000 cells. And 0.002% of my cells lit up for leukemia in July. And then since then, I've gotten like a chemo to try to put me back in remission. So I got 2 rounds of like a lower dose chemo to put me in remission. Both of them didn't work. My leukemia kept growing. Finally, my leukemia got to 8% blast in my marrow, which is a full relapse, not just a molecular relapse. So that's when they admitted me to the hospital to do another induction chemo to completely wipe me out.
What do we gotta do? We're gonna get the chemo in here and get the cancer out. Yes.
Yes.
Amen.
And during that time, I ended up in the ICU with pneumonia. And then when I got out of the ICU, I got a bone marrow biopsy and found out that the chemo did not work. So then they sent me home and I got on a clinical trial that was 4 weeks long. And this past week, I actually got results that it kind of worked, but not really. So now I'm starting a new clinical trial at MD Anderson in Houston, Texas. So essentially, that entire hospital stay for me was like hell. I couldn't breathe on my own. I had to wear a human diaper. Like, it was humiliating, and I thought I was going to die. And then for my biopsy results to come back to say, oh, you're not in remission, you essentially went through all of this for nothing, I felt doomed. I felt hopeless. At that point, I was like, I'm done. I'm going to die. And I just accepted that. And so I got on the clinic, but by the grace of God, I got on a clinical trial. So that gave me some hope. And I'm also a believer of Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior. And honestly, like, I don't know how I ever went through normal life without him. But, like, just having hope and faith really has gotten my family through this all. We're very optimistic with every opportunity that God gives us. And this last clinical trial was like a gift from God to us. And then it didn't work, which was disappointing because I was like, okay, God, like, this was supposed to be it for me. And so now this next clinical trial in Texas, like I'm very hopeful and optimistic and think like this is where I'm supposed to be and this is going to get me in remission. And, you know, like, I think you can't think about it too much, or it's just too much. Like, I can't think about it. I have to be positive about it, because otherwise you just you're alone in your feeling of hopelessness and doomness. And it got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot be hopeless anymore. Like, I have to find things to fight for, or else I'm going to die just because I'm going to stop caring.
Been asking me, Kenzie, how are you doing mentally? Do you really want to know how I'm doing mentally? This is how I'm doing. This is it.
And, like, I do care. Like, I care about my family, my friends, and my husband, and my life. And I was like, I need to find those things and fight for those things every day, or else this disappointment and hopelessness is going to kill me. So pretty much how I get through it is, you know, finding hope in the little things, and also just my faith in the comfort and peace that Jesus gives me.
All right, here is the final look. Got the charm and my Bible verses. Love how these turned out. Jesus is King. Yep, I love them. I also love this shirt that my old basketball and track coach got for me. Mrs. and Mrs. Hopkins, thank you so much. It also has my hashtag, Mackenzie kicks cancer's ass. Sorry I swore, I have cancer.
So for me, when I got on my first clinical trial, it was basically the conversation of chemo is not working anymore and any other type of chemo is too toxic for your body, especially with how hard that hospital stay was with me going to the ICU. Prior to that, though, I did talk about clinical trials a lot with my doctor, and that was when I first relapsed, and that's when the disease burden was less, so like I didn't need to go in the hospital at that point. But he basically said, we're going to try this maintenance chemo, we're going to do this chemo, but these clinical trials are available in case stuff doesn't work. I guess it's scary, like, being a part of something that, like, no one else has been a part of, but there is a lot of science and research that is backed by the drugs or treatments that they are doing. And they also are starting you, depending on where you're at in the clinical trial, but if you are starting at the very beginning in the clinical trial, like they're starting you at such a small dose. As the trial progresses, the doses go up, and that's where they find the, I guess, best dose of the drug to not be too toxic, but to also do its job and kill whatever it's trying to destroy. So I would say ask lots of questions to your doctors about it. They know the science behind it and they know the reason why they're trying to do this drug. And they can also probably tell you how far along the drug is. So for me, both of my trials have been tried in other countries and are just now coming in the US, so they have some data on it, on how it's been working on people and like the success of it. It's gotten a lot harder for me with the more treatments I've gotten. At this point, I honestly struggle to stand long enough in my kitchen to cut fruit. And that's very, very frustrating for me as someone who was a 3-sport varsity athlete in high school and played college basketball and a runner and like my body was I used to be such a competitive athlete and like I knew I could beat you when I was running and like stuff like that. So to go from that to being so out of breath that my mom needs to wheel me to an appointment, or I'm going to an airport and I need airport wheelchair because it's too long of a walk. It's like, it's really hard and it's kind of humiliating, but it also like opens my eyes and like makes me very, like empathetic to others who do deal with chronic illnesses and who can't use their bodies the way they want to, because I surely can't. But I guess I just try to do the most I can. I try to walk when I feel good and rest when I need to rest and do chores around my house because that's honestly an exercise for me right now.
Party trick. So,
But also, like, I've been so blessed with my husband and my friends and family who really just like know when I need help and like do the little things that are like hard and a burden to me so I can do things that make me happy. It's coming, like, there's different stages of it being emotional. For me, the first stage was losing a sense of myself in every aspect of my life. So I was no longer a med student. I was no longer a runner. I was no longer this beautiful wife who goes on lots of dates with her new husband or goes out and gets drinks with her friends. There were lots of parts of me that I just felt like I lost. And obviously, like, a reminder of that is every time I look in the mirror.
Just driving and vlogging and totally thinking about the possibility of dying, which I can't talk about with anyone.
Emotionally, like, because at first, when you're first diagnosed, like, I was very much like, I got this. Like, this ain't beating me. Like, no way. Like, I'm not dying from this. Like, I'm going to have a low risk mutation. I won't need a stem cell transplant. The chemo's going to work right away. I get to go right back to school and blah, 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 blah. And so I think the second phase is just realizing that it's bigger than you and it's out of your control and you have no control over the future, and all you can do is your best as far as taking care of your body and stuff like that. And that's when I really dove into faith and giving it to God, because otherwise I would have driven myself crazy, because I'm very type A and had to have control over the situation, or at least know what was going to happen. My message of hope is to every day find something to be grateful for, something that you love, something that makes you happy or smile or feel light, and to live for it. So no matter what it is in that day, if you're having a really, really, really hard day, it could be your mom makes you feel really special, so give your mom a call. But, like, do something in every day that gives you something to fight for.